Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today we're talking Quantumscape stock, ticker symbol QS. As a disclaimer, this is not investment advice. This is just a research video that I put together meant to be educational as well as entertaining. I'm going to put us into a few different news clippings and articles surrounding the company as of recently, and then we're going to take a look at the stock. Thank you for your time. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe. Please enjoy.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, smaller battery, lighter battery, faster charge, range of minimum 300 miles per hour. Is the design right now, the configuration, one that's interchangeable with different kinds of vehicles, or does that still have to get shrunk down?
Yeah, Adam, so the way it works is that we make a cell, a battery cell, which is about the size of a deck of cards. That will be the final form factor that we ship to customers. And then what the automotive OEM does is assemble those decks of cards, if you will, into modules and packs that fit their particular design. So, a long-range BEV, for example, might have more of those cells stacked up into a rectangular array under the floorboard, and a city vehicle might have a smaller number of vehicles. But from our standpoint, it's the same exact building block, which simplifies our manufacturing process and also the customer's job relative to configuring that into the vehicle.
Jagdeep Singh is Quantumscape founder and CEO. We wish you all the best and continued success with Quantumscape.
I'm always going to look for interviews with the CEOs of companies that I'm researching. It helps me wrap my head around the vision for the company. So we're going to hear more from Jagdeep Singh. Let's take a look at this article from Bloomberg. EV battery startup Quantumscape soars on tech breakthrough. We're going to watch the entire, or I'm at least going to put up the entire interview, and I want us to pay attention to the breakthroughs that Quantumscape has made.
The fundamental difference of that breakthrough, what that means for your business.
Yeah, hey Taylor. So, in December we announced the first single-layer solid-state batteries that the world has ever seen that actually meet some of the basic requirements of being commercially viable. So being able to run at high enough rates of power. You mentioned the 15-minute charge rate, very important to close the gap or narrow the gap between EVs and combustion engine-based vehicles. The energy density is higher, so you can get to longer range on a single charge. There's safety benefits, there's life benefits, economic benefits. So those are all demonstrated at the single layer level, which is the building block of these cells in December. And what we announced for the first time this week was a multi-layer version of those cells, as you pointed out. What that demonstrates is that we can actually scale up these cells, start to make bigger cells that can now be used in vehicles. So a very significant investment. I mean, a lot more work to be done for sure in terms of completing the development of these multi-layer stacks, and of course starting up the production factories, which is going to require a few years, frankly. But nonetheless, a very important milestone relative to the feasibility of what we're trying to accomplish.
How important has the Volkswagen partnership been?
Oh, it's been huge. When you work on a new technology, there's a couple of key problems you have. One, of course, is can the technology itself work? So we demonstrated that with the data we presented last month. But an equally important part of it is, does anybody care? Is there a customer that is excited enough about this new technology to where they're willing to bet, their product line on the technology? So VW took a bet really early. They partnered with us, I think, back in 2012. So it's been, over 8 years now. They've invested $300+ million in the company. We've announced that we're jointly building a manufacturing joint venture to mass produce these cells. Without that level of support, I don't think that it would have been as clear that this technology has the impact that it can have here.
When can we start to see some of the mass producing commercially available?
Yeah, so this is one of the unfortunate realities of the automotive industry and even the battery industry, which involves chemistry and you need to build factories to scale up production. So even though we have the core technology that's been demonstrated and verified in the customer's own labs, it'll take us a couple of years to really complete the rest of the job and turn up factories to get into high volume production. So we're forecasting that this will actually be in production cars in the 24-25 timeframe, which sounds like a long time by ordinary standards, but it's kind of a blink of an eye in automotive years, really.
We're getting in the weeds here, but I know that you can do it, and I want you to help guide and educate me. Do you think that this multi-layer solid state, does that overtake what we currently hear about in a Tesla, for example, a lithium-ion battery? When does that happen, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to get too much more in the weeds here, but lithium-ion batteries use what's called a carbon anode, and carbon has a certain amount of energy holding capacity. In a lithium metal solid-state battery, you replace that carbon anode with what's known as a lithium metal anode, and lithium metal anodes have a much higher energy storage capacity. So a lithium metal battery that's solid-state is going to be higher energy density than conventional lithium-ion batteries based on carbon-based anodes. But even or equally important, you get the ability to charge the battery more quickly. So you can charge up from 0 to 100% in on the order of 15 or so minutes, or 0 to 80% is probably more realistic in 15 minutes. Whereas a normal battery might take you an hour, even in a supercharger. So those are some key differences. Of course, there's a safety benefit. The solid-state materials are non-combustible. The solid-state ceramic that we use is our separator, whereas in a traditional battery, the materials are flammable, and so that's a risk. So there's a number of key benefits that really are pretty compelling. And if we can get this battery into commercial production, as we're planning on doing with VW, it's something that's going to be pretty interesting in terms of its appeal to car companies and to consumers.
I was speaking a few weeks ago with Adam Jonas. He's an autos analyst over at Morgan Stanley, and he was saying a year from now, we're going to be talking about a massive battery shortage. Do you see a battery shortage? Are you working to actively solve that?
Oh, I mean, I couldn't agree more. There's with Adam. There's absolutely there's a battery shortage now. I think Tesla's got a record of saying the biggest impediment to scaling up production for them is battery supply. Every major OEM, especially in the last year or so, has announced plans to electrify their fleet. Some of them have said that they're going to go all electric, by the mid-2020s. So these are very aggressive timelines. And you have to realize that a single car, long-range BEV with, say, 100 kilowatt-hour pack, like what the high-end Teslas have, uses the same number of batteries as on the order of 10,000 phones. So that's 4 orders of magnitude more demand than we've had from consumer electronics. And the world's battery factories just weren't set up for that kind of demand. So in a nutshell, it's absolutely the single biggest issue is production. And that's also what's really our biggest constraint is how quickly can we turn up production to meet the demand that's out there.
On that final note, I wanted to ask a question. There's been a lot of focus on Texas, of course, this week, and the fact that while wanting to shift to renewable energy, it's hard because you can't store it. And then, batteries come in. Can you give us some perspective on battery usage as a way to store renewable energy when there are deep demands like we've seen this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is absolutely spot on. I mean, I think batteries offer the ability to store energy, and the ability to store energy allows you to time shift energy generation versus energy consumption, right? So just because the sun is shining and the wind is blowing doesn't mean that that's when that energy is needed. In today's grid, energy is generated at the same time that it's consumed. So being able to break that connection and being able to store it so you can move that generation and demand sort of profile around is really key. Batteries in general are going to play a critical role in that transition. To be quite candid, the demand there for the grid is so high that you might need more than just batteries in some way.
Very cool stuff right there from Quantumscape. I can appreciate and I like the transparency. So let's take a look at this article from The Street. Quantumscape jumps on battery tech breakthrough and sort of stake. And at length, I'll leave the entire article in the description. But let's just watch this video clip that summarizes the article.
So what does 118-year-old Ford, the founder of the Model T, and Quantumscape, a battery maker, have in common? At the moment, very little, except for announcements from both companies suggesting the global consumer shift to electric vehicles may be set to hit the accelerator. Ford on Wednesday revealing plans to go all in on all electric in Europe with the retooling of the car giant's Germany plant to entirely EV by 2030. Detroit-based Ford saying Wednesday it plans to invest $1 billion in its Cologne-based plant that will start making an all-electric model in 2 years, and that by mid-2026 all passenger cars that Ford sells will either be fully electric or hybrid. Now, all of it part of Ford's announcement that it's returned to profitability in the fourth quarter and that it also is investing $22 billion globally in terms of its EV plans. That also coming at the same time that Quantumscape actually got a jolt from investors after it announced a new breakthrough in its battery technology that actually could upend the EV market overall, focus consumers on adapting quicker than expected. The San Jose-based startup saying it was able to produce multi-layer battery cells that run longer than current EV batteries and also charge much faster. And that was enough to convince billionaire philanthropist George Soros to invest something to the tune of $4.6 billion in Quantumscape. That being revealed in a regulatory filing on Tuesday that actually preceded the company's earnings themselves. Overall, unrelated events, but clearly pointing at the same thing, which is more mass adoption of electric vehicles, something that consumers have really taken a shine to through 2020 and the pandemic, and different types of rebates and offers that have really encouraged consumers to go all electric. And of course, multiple announcements from various car makers and battery manufacturers, not only that they're getting more into the EV game, but also that the technology for batteries themselves is improving. Quantumscape and Ford, no announcement per se that the two will be working together, but nonetheless both pointing in the same direction and going down the same road in terms of where EVs are going and where the combustion engine is going as well. For TheStreet.com, I'm Corey Goldman.
Okay, let's take a look at Seeking Alpha, the Quantumscape Corporation page. And I just want to highlight a few different things before we jump into the stock. Since it's a relatively... it is a newly traded company, but it's been around for a while. But we can take a quick look right here about their EPS, and they're still not, the earnings per share are still in the negative, but we can expect that this company should see a positive earnings per share in the future. So this type of risk tolerance is needed for this type of company. So I don't see that overnight, perhaps, it's just going to moon, but anything can happen. I definitely wanted to also showcase the ownership and the institutions, corporations. Here, the individuals and insiders. If you're new to my channel, hey, welcome, thanks. But anytime that I take a look at Seeking Alpha and I get to this chart, the ownership pie, I like to see the individuals and insiders holding, more than 10%, over 15% is great. Definitely shows to me that the people who are part of this company still grasp a major part of the stock. So for me, it's just a very, very nice, it's a nice touch. Institutions own it, of course, and this type of technology, I see it taking off, of course, like I said, in the future. So again, I like to showcase and I like to pay attention to who's owning this company, right? So let's also move along to some of their peers. Magna, Continental, Borg Warner, Lear. These are all solid companies, and also just pay attention to look at the market cap of these companies and the employees. And I think it's pretty impressive, just to say the least, about Quantumscape, that it's been able to perform up to the standards of the industry thus far with, the reach that they have established thus far with some of their partners. And I think that it's safe to say that this company is going to be around for a while. They've already kind of shown that they can provide the technology and the science behind it. So let's jump into the stock. Okay, we are in my trading view. Let's take a look at the 3-month trading window of Quantumscape Corporation. First, I'm just going to highlight some levels of support. And with most of the companies that IPO'd, especially late last year, it took off, right? It soared. The company was trading well over $100 for a brief amount of time before it came back to earth and kind of traded sideways and consolidated for a while. And I just want to, for me, looking at it, I want to see it grab some legs. I want to see it gain some legs. And anytime that I can try to establish some stair-stepping patterns of ascension, then I can kind of see where it's trading at and possibly making some upward moves. But I think right? Anything can happen, and I'm pretty clear about that, as we all should be, that even after the earnings report, which was, we'll take a look at it here in just a moment, but right now, let me just draw a trend line. I'm going to make a level of resistance in the $70 range, in the low 70s. It could, that level can be tested, and anytime that I think that it trades to it, if it wants to test it, cool. But I definitely think that, again, right here, look at the estimate. There's a surprise of minus 235 share. It's pretty crazy, but it really didn't phase it. In fact, the market just kind of said, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and pick up some more. So I think that if it trades above the $70 mark, if it makes that level of resistance a level of support, then I think that it can just take off and test some previous levels of resistance in, like the 90s or the $100 range. But I wouldn't get too excited too soon, but anything can happen, right? So especially if you have big time investors picking up, huge chunks of shares of it, anything can happen. It can move pretty quickly. So I'm also going to try to establish a trend line with this stock, and I'll do this from time to time every time I see a pivot on or around the earnings date. So if the stock can move alongside the trend line, then I can see it as a bullish pattern, and anytime that it trades below it, I see it as a great buying opportunity. But once it trades above that trend line and it just kind of follows above it, it might dip below and remain on top of it, then I see the stock has found its legs and now it's moving toward ascension. So that's what I got. I like it, and I hope it does well. I like this company. All right, I'm going to leave it here. I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. It helps people find my content. If there's another company, ETF, or an IPO that you'd like to see me research, just drop it in the comment section below, and I would do my best to get to it as soon as possible. Okay, y'all take care. Have a great week.